share. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you're able to access that. So over to you.
Thanks so much, Katie, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody, wherever you are. I'm actually going to hand over the share screen to Jennifer. If you're online, I think you're going to project the slides, and then I'll walk everybody through them.
Yes, I am. Katie, it's Volanino Jen. If you're able to allow me to share, I'm happy to do that.
Jen, I think you're showing up as Katie as well. So Katie, you might have to allow the other Katie to.
Oh, that's so funny, really? Okay.
Well, if absolutely necessary, I can attempt the extraordinary.
Here we go. It looks like I've got it, Bruce. I am setting it up now.
Great. Great, thanks so much, Jen. So if we can just put it on a view, fine.
How does that look?
Yeah, that's perfect. Great.
Great.
So thanks again, everyone. And Katie, thanks so much to you for getting us organized so that we can have a chance to walk through the plan and the investment case with all of the civil society and community organization reps who are online. I want to make sure we leave time for questions. So I'm going to run through the slides fairly quickly, if you don't mind. And if we just pop to the next slide, please, Jen. I'll just give people a sense of what I hope to cover. Jen, are you there? Great. So the goal of the presentation is really just to share the ACT-Accelerator story, first of all, sort of the part of it we've been through so far. Can I just confirm that I can be heard okay there, Katie? I'm getting a sign here saying I'm not being heard. Okay, great. So
I can hear you clearly, so go ahead.
We'll run through the ACT-Accelerator story, because if we're all going to play a role in promoting this as a global solution to help ensure the whole world and all communities can come out of this crisis together, we all need to be on the same page about the story, the narrative, what this is all about. So I've put a few slides in here at the beginning about the ACT-Accelerator plan itself, as well as then about the investment case. The second thing I'd like to do is help make sure we all understand the investment case as well as the financing requirements. So I have a few slides on that. Then I will move to the a little bit about the ACT-A advocacy campaign that has the goal, of course, of financing the accelerator. And then we look forward to a discussion about supporting CSOs and community organizations and how we can take this advocacy effort forward together. We all have a common goal here. So if you pop to the next slide, Jen, here's a picture of the two documents that we just released on the 25th of September. So one is the status report and plan, which provides an overview of what we call the startup phase of the ACT-Accelerator over the last 4 or 5 months, what we've actually been doing, what we've achieved. It recaps the goal, the approach, and then as well, the near-term priorities. The second document you see represented there that we posted is the investment case. And this lays out two things. First of all, the economic rationale for investing in the ACT-Accelerator as a global integrated end-to-end solution. Now that sounds self-evident, but it's challenged all the time. And if it were so self-evident, we wouldn't be working so hard for the financing. So I'm going to walk you through that as well. And in the course of that, I'll also just recap the financing requirements. So if we pop forward with the next slide, this is one of the most important ones, because what we've tried to do here is help everyone to understand the theory of change that anchors the ACT-Accelerator. And the goal is to ensure accelerated global access to the tools that I'll lay out here that can rapidly reduce the risk of severe disease and end the acute pandemic as rapidly as possible, the acute phase. So the real target is what you see right there in the middle of the slide. It's a severe COVID disease. Because remember, if we can remove the fear from COVID-19, and if we can rebuild confidence, of consumers, of individuals, of communities, of corporates, of countries, that is the key to getting, obviously, the economies working again, but more importantly, our societies interacting and our health system safer. You can see, by the way, here that it's the severe disease, which of course, and you all know this, leads to the hospital, the ICU overloads, which results in the extreme physical distancing we have to take to try and slow the virus down. And that in turn leads to the tremendous health, social, and economic disruption. So Jen, if you click once more, people can see how each element of the ACT-Accelerator actually targets this whole concept. The goal is to reduce the risk of severe disease as rapidly as possible everywhere in the world. Each one of the tools, the vaccines, diagnostics, therapeutics, all play a role in this through the health systems that are fundamental to delivering these, and through an equitable allocation framework to ensure that everybody who needs to have access to these rapidly to reduce risk gets it. If you click once more, Jen, people will see the targets that you're already aware of for each one of these areas that are calculated based on what the disease has been doing so far and what would be needed, especially in low and low middle income countries in terms of volumes, to be able to change the course of the pandemic. So that's the goal. Again, many of you are familiar with it, but may not have seen this, what we call, theory of change or causal pathway that helps you to better understand exactly what this means in terms of the tools we have. Next slide, please. So the next slide, yeah. So an important part of the story for us all to be on the same page is when we say accelerate things, people often think, okay, let's just do everything faster. And what we're trying to do through the ACT-Accelerator is actually to change the critical path that we follow to run parallel work streams for the R&D work, the manufacturing build out, the procurement, getting those agreements in place at the same time, and building out the delivery capacities. And as you can see from this schematic, our goal is to do all of those in parallel so that we can much more rapidly get these tools not only developed, but deployed equitably in a way to hit impact. So it's an important part of this story and the narrative that often gets lost when people talk about the accelerator. The next slide reminds you just of the structure and the collaborating agencies that are at the core of the ACT-Accelerator, working, of course, with that broad range of government, civil society, community organizations, industry, to achieve the goals that we just talked about. I think you're all aware, people often wonder, when they see these big organizations involved, what are they actually doing? And, just to give you a snippet of how this works, every Thursday evening from about 6:30 to 8 o'clock, we have a quick video conference with the heads of Gavi, CEPI, Unit 8, and all the heads of agencies are on these calls, FIND, Global Fund, and Welcome, to actually look at where are we, what are the challenges we're facing, in the day-to-day work, and how we address those and move still faster. So it's really pretty remarkable collaboration at that level. It could always be better, and there's been some hiccups in some of the areas with respect to civil society as well as other areas, but we need to fix those, address them, because we all have a common goal going forward. The next slide, again, this is another key part of the plan, and I think probably the most important slide as we look at how do we go forward with our advocacy for the ACT-Accelerator. And the reality is this is a unique investment. It's effective, but it's also unique in terms of trying to address COVID-19 and its consequences for the 4 reasons that you see laid out there. The comprehensive toolbox, let's say, from vaccines right through to oxygen now, reduces the R&D risks through the diverse portfolios that we work across with almost every geography, every technology. We try to mitigate the operational risk because of the nature of the co-conveners, and then a pretty unique global reach, especially working closely with CSOs and amplifying this impact through groups like the constituencies that you represent. If we go to the next slide, again, an important part of the narrative is some of the landmarks already. It's one thing to be able to say in 3 to 4 months we've been able to start working well together, but it's another thing to be able to say you've delivered real results. And if you look at the area of diagnostics, and huge congratulations to our folks at FIND, the Foundation for Innovative and New Diagnostics, because they really dug into all that morass of rapid antigen tests out there and painstakingly went through and tested these to find ones that truly are high performing and meet the standards we need to be able to much more rapidly detect, treat, isolate cases as we go forward. And as exciting, there's what we call an EUL, emergency use listing. For the first of these was just issued last week by WHO. And some of you may have seen what was a pretty remarkable announcement yesterday, but this was a volume and price guarantee so that the low income, low middle income countries have got guaranteed access to at least 120 million of these test kits, these new test kits over the next 6 months. There's also a projection that that price, which is already about a quarter of the price of PCRs, will come down further. And I like to highlight this diagnostics one right now for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, you got to be able to see your enemy if you're going to fight it, right? And we've got to know where this virus is, and we have to know fast, and we have to know everywhere. And this is the kind of potential game changer that's absolutely essential to the fight as we go forward. And the other thing is just to recognize the collaboration to get these volume and price guarantees and rapid listing of this, which demonstrates again, Katie, just the advantages of working together as a partnership, because this was, FIND, WHO, Global Fund, UNITAID colleagues, the Gates Foundation colleagues, et cetera, all working together and with CHI to make this happen. On the vaccine side, as many of you will be aware from the press reports, we now have, officially we are in business. We have now 167 countries that are part of the COVAX facility. We now have 75 countries and economies that have officially joined as self-financing countries, and they join now the 92 countries that are eligible for AMC support. So this is big and growing. There's another 26 countries that have expressed an interest to join and still have to do additional work to get there. But very quickly, we could have over 90% of the world's countries and more than 2/3 of the world's population committed to working together to reduce the risks of development, get the best possible prices for these vaccines, and coordinate the rollout in a way that all countries get access to them for their highest risk populations at the same time, thereby reducing the global risk together and the risk to our health systems, the health especially of our most vulnerable populations in terms of COVID, and then of course getting our economies going again. The allocation framework that lays this out is increasingly the emerging standard, and as you've heard previously in the area of therapeutics, we're now working hard to roll out dexamethasone, which is the only proven life-saving therapy for this disease. There's a lot of other things in the pipeline, but I just wanted to highlight that as you're out there advocating for the ACT-Accelerator, there is now concrete evidence, not just that it can work together and bring together a remarkable collaboration, but it can actually get to concrete results very quickly. If we go to the next slide, Jen, please. What you'll see here is the big, before I get to the big but, what the immediate priorities are for the next period. You can see for each one of the areas of work, there are clear, concrete deliverables that are essential to keep this on track. If we cannot finance these, if we can't find the $15 billion needed to finance the work across R&D, manufacturing, procurement, and delivery across all of the pillars over the next 3 months, we will fall off the ambitious timeframes we've established, and more tragically, people will die as a result that don't need to, because there are tools that could reduce the burden of this disease and the mortality it causes. The next slide shows you the big but, right? There are 2 big step changes needed in this period right now as we move from the startup to the scale up and impact. The first you see on the left-hand side of this graph. You can see the small bar there, about the $3 billion that have been invested so far have been critical to the startup of this endeavor. But it's the big scale up, which requires a tenfold increase in financing, which is now crucial to reserve the volumes, establish the manufacturing capacities, et cetera, to really scale up these tools to have the impact they need to have. The other challenge we have, if you click once more, Jen, is just ensuring the appropriate and optimal distribution of the resources. If you look here at this graphic, you see in blue the how much of potential vaccine supplies have been contracted by which entities, whether domestic, regional, or global, in the case of the COVAX facility. And you can see that much of the doses have been contracted by non-global mechanisms. Now, the good news is with the number of signups that we've had to the COVAX facility over this past couple of weeks, we are now in a position to start putting the deals in place to close that gap, change the red to blue, and to work with all the other blue parts of this graph to optimize the rollout. Because the critical thing very soon will not be who's actually contracted these products, but the order in which they're rolled out to have the optimal impact for people everywhere. The next slide. Now, what I wanted to switch to was the investment case. I have a few slides on this and the financing needs to get us all on the same page. If we look at the first slide, this is just a reminder that in addition to the incredible human toll of this disease and health toll of this disease and the incredible toll it's had even on the progress on completely non-health sustainable development goals. Look what happened in terms of our education goals, our poverty goals, etc. But in the face of that, there's a strong economic argument as well to invest in the ACT-Accelerator and to invest what we call domestic stimulus financing. We know there's not going to be enough overseas development assistance or classic ODA to close the gap of the funding gap of the ACT-Accelerator. But there is substantial domestic stimulus financing in the world that's being put in to try and hedge the crises. But this only has an impact in some sectors and some countries. On the left-hand side of this slide, this is just a figure you've seen before. It reminds you of the $10 trillion in stimulus financing that's been pumped into economies in the G20 countries alone to try and support businesses and economies. On the right side, you can see that even despite that, there are real challenges on the economic forecast. If you look at financial indices or unemployment rates, there's still a lot of damage done to economies, and it's not going to recover just using domestic stimulus the way it is today, because it's not addressing the root cause of this crisis, which I showed you the first slide, is a severe COVID disease. So if we pop to the next slide, Jen, thanks. What we've done here in this next slide is try and demonstrate, and really this is to help high-income countries understand. If you look, which I'm sure most of them do, but to make the case with them for investing in the ACT-Accelerator. Now, if you look at this graphic, what you see in the bottom panel is the domestic parts of the economies of high-income and low-income countries. And you can see in the darker blue where that $10 trillion of domestic stimulus financing is gone. It's gone in there to try and pump up and balance that massive loss in GDPs. You can see in low-income countries, we've not had a similar domestic stimulus. And the pain as a result is not only in that area, but if you look at the top two panels of this graphic, you can see irrespective of whether you're a high-income or a low-income country, your sectors that are dependent on mobility and global trade have taken a terrible hit. We estimate it's going to be about $12 trillion over the periods 2020, 2021. So all that domestic stimulus financing that's going into the box one is not going to address the rest of the economic pain, a big part of which is still being felt by high-income countries. So if you pop to the next slide, Jen, what you see here is really the core argument of the investment case of the ACT-Accelerator. And our argument is that by rapidly reducing severe COVID-19 disease in the low-income countries and low-middle-income countries, not only would it save lives, it would help to very rapidly restore international mobility and trade and long-term growth to the benefit of all. So that is the core argument. So even if you were to take a very, cold, let's say, economic argument of why should high-income countries invest in the ACT-Accelerator, because doing so will allow the resumption of international mobility and trade and long-term growth, which are crucial to all economies. So even in, there's a strong enlightened self-interest argument here in investing in a global solution like the ACT-Accelerator, which has the goal of most effectively and efficiently rebooting, reducing the risk, of severe disease in low-income countries, and then rebooting the whole global, health systems, societies, and economies. Next slide just shows you what that return on investment could look like. On the left-hand side of this slide, you see the financing requirements of the ACT-Accelerator. So you can see in blue the total ask, which is $35 billion. That's the funding gap that we need to cover over the coming 18 months. But the immediate gap of $15 billion is essential, as I mentioned, through the end of this year to keep us on track. It is a lot of money, there's no question. It's an extraordinary ask of leaders globally. But the reality is, once mobility and trade are restored, this investment would be repaid within 36 hours. It's that simple. Now, if the high-income countries alone were to finance this, the ACT-Accelerator with no input from others, the full return on investment would be accrued between 10 and 14 days. It'd take a little bit longer, but still very, very quickly. So that is the core argument. Jen, if you pop to the next slide, please. Now, this is the argument that is driving our ACT-Accelerator advocacy campaign. And you see on the left-hand side of this slide, the arc of this campaign. We convened the first meeting of the ACT Facilitation Council, which brought together, as you know, not just the key regional geopolitical and economic blocks of countries to discuss this, as well as core donors and major market shapers, but also civil society had a voice, and a critically important voice at that meeting. There was a joint outcome statement, which has gone to the G20 Finance and Health Ministers meeting, which further bolstered the case for the ACT-Accelerator. And now we're moving into the period of the UN General Assembly, the bank meetings, et cetera, where we are expecting to see and have already seen, as you saw on Saturday, some substantial new investments in the ACT-Accelerator. So I'm not going to go through all of this slide, but we're leaving it with you to help you see the whole arc of the campaign we're gunning for to try and leverage that extraordinary financing needed for the purposes of getting the ACT-Accelerator up and fully functional. The next slide just is to remind you that the first council meeting, this facilitation council, had a strong outcome statement with strong commitments around political leadership, advocacy for financing of this, and the shared commitments to equitable allocation. And we are now working with the co-chairs of the council on a weekly basis to try and bring this outcome statement alive through the work of and the members of the council itself. The next slide just reminds you that tomorrow we have another important event, and this is the ACT-A event at the UN General Assembly. It's convened by the Secretary General himself, who believes the ACT-Accelerator now is an important solution to protecting health systems globally, saving lives, and rebooting the global economy. You see here the registration and login if you'd like to participate or rather to observe the event. On the next slide, I'm going to now hand over to Brian. I think, Brian, you're going to take us through a few slides about the advocacy campaign and some of the work being done to translate that $15 billion now into actually asks for particular markets. That it would be fantastic if this community could help us refine and develop, and then of course to get out there and champion and bring to fruition. So with that, Brian, over to you. And perhaps, Brian, I'll come back on the final slide. Brian, you're muted there.
So it looks like Brian is muted, and I'm just trying to find the right Katie Wright to unmute.
Okay, so while Katie is working to unmute Brian, folks, just a few words about this first slide. I'll keep going until Brian can get on. So here's how we've been framing the global ask for the ACT-Accelerator. We say, number one, as you see in the subtitle, we've got to go beyond overseas development assistance if we are going to get to the level of financing needed. So we're saying, let's go beyond ODA to fiscal stimulus. And what we're arguing is that 1% of fiscal stimulus should be the target. That's the high level message. So you can see here 4 key points behind this message. The lack of an adequately financed global exit strategy is an existential threat to the economy and health security of all nations and citizens. And that only by tackling the causes of this pandemic globally will we be able to restore economic vitality at home in terms of donor countries and avert catastrophe in the poorest countries. We highlight that the ACT-Accelerator, for the reasons I explained to you, is the only comprehensive investment approach that addresses the root cause, the severe disease of disease in all countries, and can accelerate the end. And then so the big ask is to all G20 OECD countries to contribute up to 1% of domestic stimulus spending, so that we, or the equivalent amount, with the funds first going to the ACT-Accelerator itself. I think, Brian, you're unmuted and you can take us through the subsequent slides. Maybe you can pop forward, Jen, and get the WhatsApp down. Yep. Brian, we still can't hear you. Folks, I think Brian is intentionally trying to make me take you through all of this. So, folks, let me carry on. So if we look at how do we unpack the numbers now? So how might $38 billion for the ACT-Accelerator budget be funded, right? That's the total budget. The 38, we have $3 billion so far. On the left-hand side here, you see a graphic that lays out the budget at $38 billion, that perhaps 10% of this, one of our ongoing assumptions, could come from the private sector and the European Commission. The remaining funding would need to be largely covered by G20 and OECD. However, there is also an important, and we think substantive proportion that could still be covered by concessional loans and domestic resources, but that amount is still TBD, as you can see on this slide. If you pop to the next slide, Jen, what you can see here is an analytic that we did to try and say, okay, if we were to take 1% of fiscal stimulus from every country that had rolled out fiscal stimulus programs, what would that look like? And so at 1%, that's basically around $100 billion. And what we're arguing is that 34% of that, or 0.34% of the overall fiscal stimulus would go into Act A to try and obviously move that agenda forward and more rapidly get us out of this crisis. So you see an analytic here that shows you what 1% of fiscal stimulus would look like by G20 countries, and then what 0.34% of fiscal stimulus packages announced to date would look like, because that's the number that would add up to the 38 billion needed to close the financing gap of the ACT-Accelerator. The reality, however, is, this is an opening argument that this should be fiscal stimulus money in the ballpark of 1%, but then we will need to adapt and develop individual asks for each market and context, depending on other factors as well. Jen, just pop forward. So I think this is second to last slide, but when it comes to fully funding the ACT-Accelerator, a few big messages that I would like to leave you with and help frame the discussion. It's going to require extraordinary action by world leaders. And the bottom line is, this is, however, an integral part of the overall economic stimulus for countries, and it has to be financed accordingly. We recognize there's not $35 billion of funding in ODA budgets, and that to make the kind of funding we're talking about available, it's going to require all of government approaches, head of government, health, finance, treasury, development, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, trade. Everyone is going to be part of making the argument. But there's a really important point is that second to last one, that fully financing the ACT-Accelerator, and this is the point of the investment case, it's in countries' enlightened self-interest. So the final point is that, governments around the world listen to civil society, they listen to community organizations. Your engagement in this advocacy and your voice are going to be critical to its success and to the successful, not just of ACT, but of getting the entire world and all communities out of this crisis. The next slide, we just wanted to share with you and make sure you're aware of the social media pack that's been put together for the ACT-Accelerator, as these could be amplified, as a first step immediately through your channels. So I just wanted to put up some of the hashtags and other materials that are available there for you. So last slide, please, Jen. And Kate, sorry, we've run on a while, but we want to make sure everybody heard the same story. And the big picture here is the accelerator. It's up, it's proven, it's up and running, and it is the COVID-19 exit strategy, we believe, for the world, and it's already delivering results. It's explicitly designed for a simultaneous end to the pandemic, with a concomitant return to health and a faster and more sustained return to global mobility, trade, and economic activity. So the big call now on leaders around the world is how we get them to act now, finance the ACT-Accelerator, and change the course of this pandemic. So Katie, with that, back to you, and happy to help with any questions as we go forward, if we can manage to unmute everybody and they can unmute themselves.
Yeah, thanks so much. I hope everybody can hear me. Sorry, we do seem to have some technical difficulties with Brian being able to unmute from the account that he's on, so we haven't been able to sort that out, but thank you very much for that. We did want to give an opportunity really quickly before we get to Q&A to go to some colleagues from the different sort of pillar co-lead agencies to just give a quick perspective from their individual organizations and pillars about that arc that you showed, where their key sort of opportunities, key moments, and some of their key tools are. And everybody, we will post the links to the social media toolkit that Bruce just mentioned, and anything else that we get through this in the chat, and along with the documentation from this meeting. So I don't have a particular order, but I have Emma from FIND, Diane from Global Fund, and Mauricio from Unitate, unless Mauricio's had to drop off. But if I could start with Emma, maybe over to you, and then Diane, and then Mauricio.
Absolutely, Katie. And I think Diane might add more as well on the diagnostic side, as well as the health systems connector. So I can be her opening act. And I didn't bring any slides because I wanted to be very short. And frankly, Bruce has given an amazing overview. I just thought I might touch on a few important things to think about for diagnostics at quite a sort of macro level. And I think the quote, and Bruce alluded to it, from John Nkengasong, that without diagnostics we are blinded, is really true when it comes to countries being able to respond effectively to the COVID pandemic. And I think without being able to give diagnostics sort of to communities and to individuals, we're really losing an opportunity for individuals to take power over management of their own diseases here. As Bruce says, we've had a major milestone in the pillar, which is fantastic. Although I think it's important, we're just taking a small breath, but it's certainly not at all, I think, us having delivered on all of what the pillar can deliver on, because there's still much more work that needs to be done for antigen RDTs. There's more work, as Bruce has talked about, to push down the price and improve the quality. These first tools that come through are good, they're not perfect, and there's still space to go. There's still a lot of work to help countries on taking up and using these tests. And also, these are part of a portfolio of different diagnostic tests that countries will need to effectively respond to COVID. And while we have really focused on them as a first priority of the pillar, I think working across all of the diagnostic needs for COVID is really important. I think one thing to emphasize that probably came through there is there's a real immediacy in the need on the diagnostic side. One area which I think Diane will touch on more that has been significantly underpledged is around procurement funds to help us actually get these tests out through communities in low and middle income countries who are unable to shoulder some of those costs themselves. And so that's certainly an immediate need now that we have the tools, now that we frankly have some reservation of volume for low and middle income countries so that they won't be able to miss out, to be able to then deliver on that with the volume of purchases. In diagnostics, you know, we find we're a pretty little fish, so it really needs us to be able to work very closely in partnership, both with the partner group within the pillar, but also with civil society to be able to deliver on these. Diagnostics is not always a simple story to tell, as Bruce can tell you, at the kind of global level and with global policymakers. But if you go down into communities, into healthcare workers, the need on diagnostics is very apparent and obvious. And I think we need to bridge that disconnect between the kind of lack of a sense of urgency around diagnostics and clear story at the global level through to the actual reality, particularly for frontline health workers. And with that, I might hand over to Diane to add some more on diagnostics and on health systems.
Thanks, Emma. And yeah, I'll keep it brief as well because we do want to engage in some questions. But yeah, just to emphasize that on the diagnostic side, we can't emphasize enough how exciting the last 24 hours have been, because having these new tests available, having the volume guarantee, having the price point, all of this negotiated at the same time and simultaneously available in low and middle income countries and high income countries. Those of us who worked on some of these issues during the AIDS pandemic in the early days will, I think, be very aware of how remarkable it is to have these tools available simultaneously everywhere. And so we really do have a responsibility to make sure that we have sufficient funding to be able to roll these out effectively over the next few months as part of the total package, as we were saying. And that's not to neglect the fact that the PCR tests that are already available are the ones that are being made available, as Bruce had outlined, with the allocation model, because there aren't enough of them and the demand is so high that we can't meet it for the low and middle income countries. So there's still a lot of work to do in making sure that we have a full balanced approach. The PCR test is still very much needed as part of the overall response. So the whole piece of still radically underfunded. We need both new products as well as the ability to bring them to scale. And maybe I'll link that to some of the work that's happening on the Health Systems Connector. You'll see that we've focused in the investment in the activities that are happening now. The Global World Bank lead that work stream with WHO. That we focused very much on the enablers that need to be in place for these tools to be made available in low and middle income countries for their effective deployment, and also on the most immediate needs right now to respond to the disease. And that's very much the key, which we've talked to this group about many times before, and oxygen as two of the most basic, simple, actually very cost-effective interventions that can prevent the spread of infection and prevent increased illness and indeed mortality. So those are some of the focus of that Health Systems Connector. But as we get these new tools, so for example, part of the announcement made yesterday on diagnostics was to do some implementation research around the use case of these new diagnostic tools, so that we can indeed make sure that the health systems are ready to deploy them in the most effective way possible, and that countries are able to use them in their test, treat, and isolate strategies. So those are some of the key things that the Health Systems Connector is focused on. And I know that my colleagues at UNITAID are probably going to say the same thing. We can't emphasize enough how underfunded all the pillars of the ACT-Accelerator are, and in particular diagnostics and therapeutics, and the health systems piece is almost entirely unfunded. So these tools are only really going to change the trajectory of the pandemic if we can deploy them everywhere that they are needed. And so the real need for scale up in funding is very important, as you know. And just to reinforce what Bruce had said, also just around the fundraising piece, because as the Global Fund, we're also very active in that piece. We are very aware that the overarching ask, which is it's important to just recognize, is the main point is that this needs to be outside of ODA. We're not going to do this with ODA envelopes, and it needs to, with this sort of unprecedented crisis, we need unprecedented funding sources. And so that piece of the argument is really important. But then each context needs to adapt the argument to what's appropriately happening in that context. So all of these examples that we're giving are very indicative, and you need to drill down in each of the individual markets to see what a local ask might be. But I think what we do need is a real uprising of noise and advocacy around the fact that what is currently on the table is inadequate, and that the current budgets at the country level, shifting around ODA budgets where you're taking away from education or climate or something to give another couple of million to health, that is not going to do it. We need something unprecedented and a level of investment that's unprecedented. So I think that's where we're really also looking to you to help us to raise that point very loud and clear. Katie, I think I should pass over to our Unit 8 colleagues now. I think I see Mauricio's joined us, and so that's enough from diagnostics and health systems for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah,
Thanks.
Mauricio. Yeah, there you are.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks everybody. Bruce, always so convincing and so sharp. I hope that tomorrow we'll be able to get a few checks signed off right before, right after the event. But folks, and I see some friendly faces or names around the Zoom call. You've been around Unitaid, you've been around Global Health for a long time, but we have never been around what we're facing right now with the trillions of dollars. I mean, it's simply the numbers are staggering. And the fact is that if we don't all pull together to this, we're not going to get there. We're going to get there a lot slower with a lot, heavier consequences. And one of the things we haven't talked about, and Bruce is fully aware of this, is why we're doing this, everything else continues. Our HIV, TB, malaria, and everything else continues to, just in a worsened kind of way, really affect the most vulnerable. So the faster we get through this, the more we learn from this, but the faster we can also, get back on track with the, with SDG3 as a whole. This is an important moment, but let's not lose track of, of SDG3. And we cannot do this without you. We cannot do this without civil society. You are the voices on the streets. You're the voices in the ears, sometimes deafening voice of the ears of the policymakers and decision makers. And this is, it's been our commitment from Unitaid and through the board members that we see here represented, but, cut across the different pillars and partnerships of the ACT-A to move this forward. Now I'm here to talk about the therapeutics. Sorry, Diane, I was picking up on where you started, and I really want to echo her words. What we see right now is a big ask of 35 billion. The devil is very much in the details. It's not a lot of money when you put into that 1% or 0.34%. I like the way that Bruce is lashing this to get to the 10 billion round figure for the US. Let's see, November is not too far away. But the fact is that there is right now a serious imbalance in the way that this whole system is being financed. And I think we have to take the hats off for what COVAX is trying to achieve. And that system is simply fantastic. People see a all integrated system about R&D, sort of market readiness in terms of the industry, and then the rollout. So it's quite a unique way to work. And Gavi and Seppi are doing a tremendous job. When it comes to therapeutics and diagnostics, you see much more of a disaggregated way of working. You see the organizations and the work streams for those who participate in the partnerships that talk about R&D, that talk about market readiness, and then some of the key partners talking about the major rollout. The fact of the matter is that this disaggregation makes it sometimes countries ask us questions, and Bruce will be the first one to acknowledge this, that, okay, but what is this money for and where this money is going? While for COVAX, there's no question. The money is going to a facility, and the facility is going to get the vaccines out. So you need to understand the differences between the one pillar and the others. Coming specifically to therapeutics, and we participate very much with FIND and the Global Fund on Diagnostics, and we're delighted to have another piece of the puzzle solved here that would, take us away from a $150 test all inclusive to a $5 15-minute window of getting things moving, whether airports, houses, homes, or public sector entities. This is a big change. In therapeutics, two things I need to highlight to you. First is that we were effectively able to roll out dexamethasone as an effective way to deal with severe cases of COVID. So this is out now in a number of countries with UNICEF and others. We have already procured, and these are already hitting low-income countries. But that was an easy thing. It's it's a drug with no IP issues. Even though we had difficulties in trying to come up with the right formulation, not many people produced them, but we're over this, and this is now out. And right now, the next phase of therapeutics, which must be essential to diagnostics and vaccines, there is not a single silver bullet to this, is going to be the monoclonal antibodies. And there is a specific investment case for this that I'm happy to share with you. And I'm sure that I see here Vim is in this call, and he sits at our board, and he's seen this, and we've shared this, of course, within the partnership. And the monoclonal antibodies and new antivirals represent the new frontier in how to deal with COVID at different levels of the illness. And right now, we've identified a couple of very serious treatments coming up through the pipeline. And we're working with the Gates Foundation and other partners, and especially with Wellcome, with whom we co-facilitate the therapeutics partnership to get these new treatments out. And to get them out means to get them from phase 2 to phase 3, from phase 3 out to the markets before the major rollout. If we don't do a market intervention right now, these treatments, which are like one-off shot, they're biosimilars, they're going to go between 1,000 and 5,000 a pop. And this is not going to be affordable for the great majority of the globe. So right now we're trying to talk about market advance commitments. And we're talking about reverse capacity for production for these monoclonal antibodies. And we're having a target price across the different companies we're working with of $50 a treatment. And that is opposed to the 1,000 to 5,000 range. And for that, and in addition to the new antivirus, we're looking into a $400 to $500 million investment. And this is not major procurements. This is just securing that these are going to be produced at the right time at the right price. We're happy to share more information with you on how these things work and how civil society can and should be involved. And I mean, the best way to do this is, again, through the partnerships. Here, let's not lose sight of the 35 billion, but also of what we're trying to achieve, what we need to achieve together. So thank you, and happy to, provide any clarifications needed.
Thanks very much, Mauricio, Emma, and Diane. Appreciate the comments. And Brian, we see you now. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity if there was anything before we go to Q&A, if there was anything that you wanted to say in summary. Nope. Okay. We still can't hear you. Is that the problem? We can see you, but we can't hear you. Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. Please use the chat if it's available to you. So I would like to ask folks in terms of asking questions and having a discussion now with all of those who are on the line, if you could please use the raise hand function. There was a couple of questions that had been sort of placed in the chat. And I think, Diane, I see that you've tried to respond to some of the challenge of the question around how the specific asks and assumptions were put into the investment case, but then also how any pledges that do come in will be dealt with. And I wonder if you might be able to address that question for everyone, just, or Bruce or whoever is the right person to answer that question. And perhaps that helps to give an idea of the role of the Facilitation Council, which had its first meeting earlier this month. So Bruce or Diane, maybe over to you to answer that question, then ask colleagues to please use the raise hand function or chat function to input any questions so we can get to those.
Diane, maybe I'll just take a first crack at it. So in terms of the percent to be funded by private sector and EC, these are targets. These are assumptions based on how so many of the other international initiatives that we work through are financed. So, you know, it's not a hard and fast number. It's not a promise from anybody. This is a working target that we have to adjust as we go forward, right? The important thing is for us to get on the table that we need everyone contributing. Private sector, there are certain parts of in particular where there's been big financial flows during the course of the pandemic, and let's try and put some of that money to work for this. European Commission, there's also other, regional actors that we need to be looking at. What you don't see in the slide, of course, is for the multilateral development banks and the rest. And, that's another way that countries could fund part of the of this. But this is all about how do we make the ask to the high, upper middle income and other countries? So those are simply targets that we put together to help us frame an overall campaign. In terms of the 1% fiscal stimulus ask and how that was elaborated, basically we looked at what kind of financing is going to be needed to get a real step change in the global COVID response. And it's in the $100 billion range when you look right across all the sectors affected and the health impacts, et cetera. But as importantly, so beyond the ACT-Accelerator. And then you also want to be looking at, okay, what is going to be a very simple way to communicate this, generate, and translate that into meaningful numbers that could actually change not just the ACT-Accelerator's financing situation, but the larger COVID response. And as we looked at different scenarios, the 1% fiscal stimulus ask was something that very quickly resonated with people as a great way to start the conversation, because number one, it communicates this is not ODA, this is beyond ODA. We need ODA doing the important things that ODA does today, and Maurizio referred to some of them. It also communicates that it's just a fraction of what's going into domestic stimulus financing today. And the third thing it immediately communicates is where this funding can come from. So, part of this is a communication and framing. It also is in a ballpark that helps to address the challenge that we're facing. But what we've got to do is take that big sort of 1% fiscal stimulus ask and then very quickly generate what is the right ask in a particular country or market based on so many factors, including how much they will have contributed today, what is their willingness, ability, et cetera, to give. But it's all got to add up to $35 billion, and there's certainly $15 billion in the coming 3 months. Or frankly, we're just going to, this is going to drag out much longer than it needs to. Many more people are going to get sick than need to, and people are going to die that don't need to, the bottom line. Diane, you were part of a lot of the conversations around the framing the fiscal stimulus comment. Anything you'd add to that? Or correct, more importantly?
I think that's exactly right. And as we've been saying, I think there was another challenge in the way in which the pledging was done for some of the two big events we already had, which was that there were some large numbers pledged. And I think, Bruce, it was your team that was on the sharp end of this, trying to figure out what those numbers were and where that money was challenged. And honestly, it's taken us, I would say, months, right, Bruce, to get to a really accurate reading of what money was coming in, what wasn't, which parts of the accelerators and the pillars money was targeted to. And so I think we've all realized that we need a joined up overall advocacy umbrella that kind of is coherent and that challenges donors to do more than what they what they have in their normal ODA budgets. But we also need to have a very targeted country-based discussion, and that's the piece we're working on now, where we're collaborating, but we're not going in saying just give a bunch of money to the accelerator, because we don't think that in all of our experience, donors prefer to have a much more direct kind of what are they getting for their money. And that's part of what the investment case now does, is it lays out exactly what the pieces of the puzzle are. Obviously, we're trying to tell donors that they need to contribute to the entire accelerator across all the pillars, and this is what you get for each piece of the solution. And I think Bruce laid out very clearly the nice theory of change, which really shows that you need all the tools to get to a good outcome. So we hope that donors will do that. But in reality, some donors will contribute to one pillar, some donors will contribute to another, and we need to be responsive to what the interests are, and while telling a joined up story, be able to take whatever money is available and channel it into the right path. So to give you a very concrete example, we were as the Global Fund, we're in conversation with a donor where it became very clear that what they were interested in doing would much more appropriately be targeted to FIND. And so we had a conversation with FIND, and FIND is now very well advanced in securing that donor to pay for their piece of the puzzle. So I think it's that kind of collaborative way where we're able to target the money where it matches best, and make sure that we try and fill gaps and target where there are really major gaps where we can all go in and say, you know what, this is the piece we need most urgently funded right now. So it's quite an unusual situation for us all, but actually really, really good for global health, I think, because it's really making all of our different roles very coherent and very visibly coherent to the donor groups. And I think that's all to the good. And hopefully we'll come out the other end a much more joined up sector. Thanks.
Thanks, Diane. I appreciate you ending on that positive, that positive note too. It does feel like long days and a lot of challenges. So it's nice to hear the positive. So we have a couple of hands raised, Brooke Baker and Robin Waite. So I'll go to them in that order, Brooke and then Robin. And I know that Robin has something she's just going to share on screen really quick when it gets to her question, just to keep an eye out for that. So Brooke, go ahead.
So thanks so much, and thanks for the presentation, and thanks for the important work that ACT-Accelerator is trying to do. But of course, as you might suspect, many people in civil society still have criticisms about certain aspects of it and of the investment case that you presented. And there's a lot of details. I'm not going to go through them all just now. But we do think that in significant ways, the ACT-Accelerator is not using the megaphone it has at this point in time to really emphasize the scope of what's needed. Unfortunately, we don't have much leadership at a global level about the level of response. And as you say, the actual things that could be done if enough money were on the table. And by focusing only on the acute phase and severe disease, in a sense, I think the Accelerator at this point is underselling what needs to be sold to the global community to respond to this pandemic. We think that it needs a more dynamic approach that looks at the pandemic response unfolding over time. It needs to talk about what's needed beyond the severe, reducing severe disease stage. And as well, we think the framing can't simply be focused on the self-interest of rich countries to open their economies, that there needs much more framing from the perspective of global solidarity, equitable access, and human rights. We think as well, and this is something that our colleagues who are living with long haul consequences of COVID, that the emphasis on severe disease is really neglecting at this point the lived experience of 10% of the people who have contracted COVID and survived, who are having long-term, long-lasting consequences. And that experience is really not reflected in most of the global dialogue, and nor certainly yet in the investment case. So, you know, what to do? I mean, this is the investment case you've written. We think the plan is actually a much better document, but we do urge a different kind of framing and a more dynamic and long-term approach in talking to donors. It would be vitally important, for example, for someone to say, What's going to happen with the other 66%? I mean, where did you come up with this $1 billion figure? What is it that ACT-Accelerator is not doing? And I think it's quite clear that the ACT-Accelerator's ambition, even though it's significant because it's about the only thing in town, it's by no means proportionate to the need. The amount of tests being produced, procured, the amount of vaccine being procured, the amount of therapeutics, particularly a very limited monoclonal antibody, procurement goal of 9 million doses over 2 years. I mean, these are simply not adequate to the response that you say, you yourselves articulate as needed. And so, we do hope that the messaging continues to be refined to put even what you're asking for in this immediate phase for the accelerator is contextualized with respect to a much larger need in low and middle income countries.
Thanks, Brooke. Robin, we'll get your question as well and then go back for responses.
Sure, great. So I'm Robin with Results Canada. I have a quick comment, question, and ask. Maybe I'll just start with the comment. We've been campaigning around a 1% ask in Canada for some time now. And we've had a lot of success to date, actually. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just announced another $400 million this morning. And I just wanted to share, can everyone see my screen? I think so. I just wanted to share that in addition to the comments already been made by Diane and Bruce about the 1% framing, we have taken it to be a very principled ask as well. At least 1% of our response should be going to COVID-19. And this type of messaging that you see on screen was really effective for getting Canadians, everyday Canadians, to understand why this is critically important. 1% is really not much if you put it in context of the 100% of our stimulus package. So I just wanted to share that with others in case at all helpful for your own framing. We can also share all of our assets made to date with others if you want to like adapt it and put your own logos on it, or use inspiration, draw inspiration from it. Okay, then my question is this resource available in French? I ask because when I'm at this website and I click on Francais, it takes me to a totally different page. And unfortunately, I don't understand French very well. So I can't find the investment case in French. And it would be really helpful for me to have access to it like ASAP for my advocacy purposes in Canada. And then lastly, I have an ask. So while I'm engaging on webinars like this, if there's a screen that you share that is really compelling and could be helpful for me to use in my own advocacy, I take a screenshot of it. I always tend to get your permission first. So Brian and Linda, for example, heard from me last week because I wanted to start using this content ASAP. And it would be really helpful for me anyways, and I'm sure other advocates, if you would start putting the World Health Organization logo on every single slide, because it essentially creates an opportunity for me to grab a quick graphic from your slide deck and get it out to the world really, really rapidly without having to create anything myself, or without having to come to you and bug you asking you to create a graphic for me. So that's my question, is in French, and my ask is, could we get these slide decks with the WHO logos on it? Because again, it then comes from an authoritative voice, which makes our advocacy more high impact and readily listened to, I guess. And that's all for me.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Brooke. Maybe pass it over to you, Bruce, for a first response, and then others to join in and respond to the specific questions. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Katie, and thanks all. Great questions. The need is huge, right? It's much, much bigger, and the cost of COVID is much, much bigger than what we're capturing in this. And it's and what we're really encouraging is other groups, even here within WHO, actually, to help generate the more comprehensive and extensive investment cases as needed. This was designed for a very specific purpose, and it's made very explicit in the document itself. What people said is, we strip everything else. They said, look, we know, we can see on TV the incredible social costs, incredible human costs. We see this every single day. What we need is the actual economic cost to and return on investment on this in a very specific area. So this was really generated specifically for that reason. But if you look at the front end of the document itself, it's only a 6-page document, right? And a page and a half on the front end of it tries to capture and just that huge, human, social, societal costs of this disease, both what we know today. It doesn't mention the future. This is a good point, but so some of that is captured there. And any suggestions, great, bring it on. Right now, we've been at this for 5 months, and we've been able to get to less than 1/10 of the financing need of this. So, there's lots of other documents that are out there that talk about this broader cost, right? There's this piece that was published in The Lancet 2 weeks back that lays out the actual cost of this is $52 billion per month or something, extraordinary like that. So those huge numbers are out there. But governments, and what we've heard very clearly is we're having a lot of trouble dealing with the huge numbers, right? There are huge losses, but when it comes to finding the fiscal space to put money into, international efforts at this time, that's a challenge. And what we're being told is don't go up. We're being told pare this down to what is the absolute minimum needed to make this thing a success. So, we've got to find the balance on that. But the point is well taken. The need's definitely huge, much larger. Wasn't the intent of this document, but if we can improve it, we're going to update this, reissue all the time. Bring it on, but bring on specific language, because that's really, really helpful, and specific numbers, because that's what we need. So that's all great. And I think one thing we can do, if you look at the document itself, it references a lot of those other authoritative and more comprehensive analytics that look at those larger costs. But point well taken. And we certainly wouldn't want anything to suggest the costs were any lower than they really are. In terms of Robin, your comment, congratulations just with the work with Canada. That's fantastic. It's great feedback to hear as well, how useful this was as a framing, let's say, entree for the ask. In terms of the document available in French, not yet. In fact, we will, once they stabilize, because we keep getting back and forth on little bits and pieces of this, but we will try and translate them into the official languages. French would be the first. We always do that the fastest, but it may take a little while. In terms of making the materials available, this is very much a partnership, Robin. And the last thing we would want is that people, see this as a WHO initiative, because it really isn't. When you look at, the successes we're having in so many different areas, this is the essence of a partnership, and that's a concern on how we would brand materials. What I would prefer is if we could just put that little script that we use for the ACT-Accelerator on it. If you do need to say WHO, and that will help, we can have the ACT-Accelerator, and then we have a little thing below that, a little script that just has hosted by the World Health Organization or something like that. But I would really, really not want to suggest the ACT-Accelerator is any agency, because it just loses everything that I think we've been so successful as a community in achieving so far. So if maybe we can find some solution, Robin, that works for you, just fire us a note or fire a note to Brian. We'll figure out whatever you need for whatever. And by the way, our materials, of course, are all can be used. I mean, we make those for anybody to be able to grab whatever's helpful. One of the problems is our files tend to be rather gigantic, so it's a little bit of a challenge to share them sometimes. But Brian, we can make sure that any civil society colleagues can access this.
Thanks, Bruce. I'm happy to say that we actually already have the slides from you all from today, and they'll be up on the COVID-19advocacy.org website with the recording from this call and other materials. So we received it, we will get it up. Did anybody else, did Diane or Emma or Mauricio or anybody else want to respond to any of those comments or add to what Bruce has just said? I know, Diane, you had put some thoughts around the framing as Brooke had presented it in the chat. Is there anything else? Otherwise, I'll move on. Just unmute if there is.
Maybe Katie. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm sorry if people have put things in the chat I may not have seen. as all the Diane and everyone else knows, I am not particularly facile at getting through these things. So I'm going to rely on you, Diane, if there's something you think you saw there that we need to respond to.
That's okay, Bruce, but I'm not going to speak to WHO's emergency use approval, so you might want to answer Peter on that one.
There's a question there on that. Okay.
Yeah, maybe in the meantime, I'll just answer Christian on the issue of the equity in country. And so one of the things, Christian, we've been working on at the Global Fund, as you know, we work through our country coordinating mechanisms. And so very early on, we tried to make sure that the CCMs would continue to operate and included discussions of the COVID-19 response. And you might be aware that part of the challenge in the first few months of lockdowns and so on was that because of the connectivity issues experienced by some civil society organizations, they weren't able to connect into virtual country coordinating mechanism discussions with the ministries of health and so on. And so we made a number of, together with some deals we made with the private sector telecoms companies, we made a number of free access and bandwidth issues and airtime issues available in country so that civil society could stay connected, exactly to address this issue of making sure that key populations and most affected communities are properly serviced by the kinds of interventions that we're talking about. So we've certainly made an attempt to do that. I know that the disruption in country is still moderate to high in many cases, and so I wouldn't pretend to say that everything's working perfectly, but certainly we have our eye on that as an implementation partner, certainly because we're the ones making sure everything gets to the grassroots level, and are hoping that those discussions are happening appropriately at the country level. But I take the opportunity to reinforce what Brooke said, is that one of the things that our civil society teams have been doing, and unfortunately neither Linda nor Kate could be on this call today, but what they've been doing is trying to develop a coherent COVID-19 community of people who have survived COVID-19. We've been interviewing a number of those people. There is a story of Nambasa on our website that is the story of somebody who is HIV positive, is an MDR-TB survivor, and also she and her husband have just had COVID-19. Luckily, both survived as well. So that idea of both the long-term effects of COVID and the health impact of COVID is really important to integrate into these conversations. And it's also why we've been pushing so hard for civil society to be represented in all the work streams of the ACT-Accelerator, so that voice and those concerns are baked into the DNA. And I know that UNIDAID has been thinking a lot about that as well, in terms of the implementation use cases for many of these things, and taking on board the fact that when we do think about how tools are deployed, we have to think about the equity aspects of how they reach countries and how they reach populations. So very much on our mind. I wouldn't say we had it all solved yet, though.
Thanks for adding in, Diane. Before I go back to you, Bruce, to answer the specific question around from Peter that's in the chat, Eloise Todd from the Pandemic Action Network, I hope I got that right. I'm really bad with acronyms and what they actually mean. But Eloise, I know you wanted to come in a little bit about the work that you guys are doing and share with others that are still on the call. And we do need to wrap up in the next 10 minutes, I think, because we've gone over, but what a good discussion so far. So thank you. And Eloise, over to you.
Thanks so much, and thanks for putting together this call. Great to see so many friends on here. I think I feel quite optimistic and positive about the great work that's been done both by the ACT-A partners and lots of people on this call. There's been a bit of a discussion about the specific asks by country, and I think what I just wanted to set out really clearly is that the Pandemic Action Network, we've got a resource mobilization working group, which everybody here is extremely welcome to. It's every Wednesday at 3 p.m. European time, I believe. And you can ping me if you want details. But basically, we've been focused on ACT-A really since the first investment case, if you like, at the end of June. And from then, when it was the previous 31 billion, we were looking at different ways to carve up the asks. And I think that we're all just really enthusiastic about the fact that the money should definitely not come from ODA unless absolutely necessary. We should be looking in all parts of the budgets. The 1% framing is brilliant as a kind of way in and to make the point that we've had all this money spent in different ways. And, you know, obviously in Canada, it's working quite well as the central point of the campaign. And I think that what we feel very urgent about is that, you know, we've got this big event tomorrow. We've had Canada and the UK doing big things on Saturday, which is fab. But we desperately need those kind of specific asks by country. And one of the things we've been doing is talking to as many frontline advocates as possible. And obviously, as many others have said, that we need to craft these by market. But one of the things I'd say is important, they need to make sense obviously in the market, but also relative to each other, which is why we've been looking at different methodologies so that we can stand up. And certainly in Europe, this is something, as people will know from their experience, if you work in multiple markets, there's often a view over the channel or over the border as to what other countries are doing. So all that to say, I think we are more aligned than maybe people have. We've had discussions about whether to go with the 1% or whether to go with a sort of fair shares type analysis. I actually think both are like a win-win together, because we need to have a bespoke ask per market within this 1%. So I just wanted to share that reflection and wonder if that chimed with others, especially from ACT-A partners. And we are actually working on those numbers, and we would really love to get them nailed so we can get lobbying and have a yardstick to measure people by both tomorrow and in the coming urgent weeks. So that's an open invitation. I'm happy to send round information after this call. And yeah, it'd be great to land that and align as much as possible. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Eloise. And yeah, I think from, you know, so many hats that we all wear, but from a GFAN perspective, that's something we're definitely interested in aligning and working with Pan and others who are leading on sort of trying to figure this out, because the arc in Bruce's slides clearly shows such a tight timeline and the urgent need to get something more in the next few months. So the good work can continue. Did anybody want to come in on any other specific questions? Bruce, there was a question specifically about a vaccine.
Yeah, question about
yeah.
So WHO has not issued an emergency use listing for any vaccine, as I think everyone on this call will be aware. I heard a similar thing. Sorry, I can't remember who asked the question. Pardon me, in the chat. But I heard a similar thing. This was from Christian or from from Peter. Yeah, sorry, Peter. So no, there are no WHO approved vaccines, and no vaccines yet have generated sufficient efficacy or safety data to even be considered for an emergency use listing. But it's not unusual that in the course of communicating things, I mean, we get so misquoted in the press every single day that I'm not surprised something like this could happen. But China also very, very clear on the status of the vaccines and what's required for emergency use listing with WHO or pre-qualification. So if that can help. Are there any other questions like that I might help with, Katie, before I hop off? Sorry, I've just...
No, I think that was the last specific one that I had seen.
Great. Maybe just, Katie, while I have the line, just to thank everybody for joining and giving just us the opportunity to walk you through the plan, through the investment case, and through what the financing requirements are, as well as the campaign that we envisage going forward. You know, there's huge challenges, there's huge gaps. Everything could be done better. We know that. The goal here is to go very, very fast to help people everywhere to get out of the mess that we're in with COVID-19, and especially in terms of their health, you know, their societies, their families, their communities. So everything can be done better. We really appreciate that. it's going to be a lot better if civil society and community organizations are right at the center of this, obviously. And I think that is dawning on everybody. Some people it's taken longer to dawn than others. So thanks for the patience with that. But jump in, be part of the solution. Katie, just a special, shout out and thanks to you for getting us organized and providing a platform that we could get together on and discuss these things. It's hugely appreciated by all of us. And so forgive us for our shortcomings, help us be better at it as we go forward. And we are listening. Huge thanks to Brian. I'm sorry, Brian, you couldn't be heard on the call because you did so much to help working with Katie and the others and then me to make sure that we could make it work. I think the big thing here, commitment on our side, Katie, is anything we can do for anyone on the calls or beyond to help you play a more meaningful role in all of this or help us do our job better. We're here for that.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks to you and Brian and all of the others who spoke today and jumped on quickly. Mauricio, thank you. I should have known to reach out to you sooner, but thank you for jumping on quickly. I'm just popping a link in to the chat for everyone. Just, appreciated, I think it was Diane and Bruce, your comments around civil society representation within ACTA and how welcome it is and how needed it is. And just to say that the platform has been working to get representatives into all of those different pillars and various working groups. And right now that link that I've just posted is for the process to identify the civil society and community representatives to the Facilitation Council. You can expect to see another one around the Health Systems Connector work probably in a couple of weeks. Those discussions are really just sort of getting underway, although there have been interim reps for some time. We're very close to being able to publish a list of the diagnostic selected representatives and the vaccine ones as well in the coming days and week probably around vaccines. I'm not sure about that one. That one's been a harder process. But so just to say again, that COVID-19advocacy.org is where the platform that is co-led by myself and colleagues at GFEN, as well as StopAIDS UK and Wacky Health, is that COVID-19advocacy.org for information there. But of course, like everything in this world, overlaps with our work as GFEN too. So we'll hear from, I saw a lot of GFANers today. So lovely to see you all on the call. We look forward to an opportunity in the coming months, probably to have another call like this and check in on some of the strategy and some of the specific work that we're doing. So thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Mauricio. Thank you, Brian and Jen in the background, making everything work. And apparently, thank you for my 6-year-old Max as well. So have a great rest of your day.
Hi to him.
Yeah, that's for you, buddy. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. And we'll put this up on the website as soon as possible.
Congratulations. Wonderful. Cheers.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.